So for this example, we have that divorce rates are considerably higher for those who marry younger, but education may play a role in the longevity of the marriage, where the equation D equals 1.8n plus 14 describes the percentage D of marriages that end after n years when married with only a high school education. Determine the percentage of such marriages that end after 10 years. So, for this, we have our equation, and we're given a value n. We are told, in this case, that n is equal to 10. So if you want to find the percentage that ended in divorce after 10 years where the couples only had a high school education, what we would do is just take our value d and plug in that 10 in the formula. 1.8 times 10 plus 14, where 1.8 times 10, 18 plus 14 is equal to 32. So, those of you that aren't familiar, this double arrow means implies. I'll use it a lot to say that this is what comes next. This implies the divorce rate for such marriages is 32% after 10 years. The, in particular, percentage of marriages ending in divorce after 10 years for high school graduates without any college, 32%. And I will say here, before we close out the section, that it's important to bear in mind, while this sort of model can tell us something useful, there are obvious limitations here. Say, for example, we did n equals 50, we wanted to see how many survive 50 years, which to be fair isn't going to be very many of them. For that matter, actually it's getting more and more common for people to live 50 years past high school, but it's still not a given. If we follow this model though, we would have D is equal to 1.8 times 50 plus 14, and 44. That's too much, way too much. Where 1.8 times 50 is 90 plus 14 is 104%, which would imply that more than every marriage that way ends in a divorce after 50 years. It's not quite possible. Funky. Anyway, point is, these models, they're good for some things, not perfect. Obviously, a model is at best going to be an approximation, unless you really, really have something special or basic. Anyway, the next thing we're going to look at is a bit more careful defining for things like this. And I don't mean things like this in terms of models, I mean things like this in terms of linear equations in section 1.2.